I think we'll get started, Doctor.
Yeah, yeah.
So, good morning to everybody present, and thank you for being here, and especially uh, guests of Madras Naturalist Society. We
சரி என்ன
extend a
பண்ணணும்
very warm welcome to the guests who have joined us. Uh, I now will request our president, Mr. Sudhakar, to introduce Dr. Badri Narayanan Tyagarajan to you. And I request everyone, excepting for Dr. Badri Narayanan and Mr. Sudhakar, to kindly use your mic. And
So, good morning, all the MNS members and our guests who are attending this Zoom presentation. It's my it's a great pleasure that I welcome Dr. Badri Narayanan, a multifaceted personality, to present this very interesting topic. And he is probably the best qualified man to talk on the interaction between trees, plants, and the birds. First, a little introduction to Dr. Badri. See, I need not tell you, he is a doctor who heads the Agarwal Eye Institute in Madurai. Apart from that, he has got other facets to his personality. He is very well-known bird enthusiast, and he is an authority on the identification of birds of the southern region, especially south of Madurai. I think he is very knowledgeable about all the birds and the areas in which the birds are found. And interestingly, he is also an expert on the plants and trees, which he picked up somewhere along the way. And so he is very well qualified to look at the interaction between the plants, trees, and the birds. And added to that, his knowledge of Tamil and the interaction between the Tamil names and the plants and the birds. He is very familiar with the Tamil names for birds and trees and plants, which many of us are not. I think one of the very few people who have made an effort to look at the Tamil name for all the trees and plants that he gets identified. I had the good fortune to meet Dr. Badri very many years back. He has been actually one of the earliest members of the Madras Naturalist Society. I remember a survey we undertook in Sirmalai, Dr. Badri and along with Dr. Santaram and Kumaran. It was amazing how we identified the birds, and also he was looking at the plants and trees as well. I especially remember a grueling descent from the Sirmalai hill towards the Konai Road station, which at a moment of weakness we thought we could do it. It was so slippery and so heart-raising, but you couldn't. You had to concentrate on every step that you took. But Dr. Badri was looking at the plants and the trees in spite of the thorns that, I mean, he was more interested in identifying the thorns that stopped him rather than looking at what it had done to his skin. And of course, I was also very interested in plants in a different way. The roots of the plants, actually, the potatoes that were cooked in the guest house. So that was, I had to uphold the MNS tradition, of course. So Dr. Badri is, what I'm trying to say is Dr. Badri is the person to go to if you have got any idea of planting a bird-friendly garden. I think that is the need of the hour now, because we are talking about planting indigenous trees and plants in cities, and also trying to encourage indigenous plants which will attract birds and butterflies. The best person to go to is Dr. Badri. So I look forward to his presentation and look forward to learning a lot from his presentation as everybody. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Badri.
Thank you, Sudhagar and Vijay, for this wonderful introduction. I must, I think Sudhagar did not realize the real purpose of my stopping to look at plants on the way down from Sirumalai. I think that was to catch my breath rather than to see plants. He must have mistaken it for the fact that I am looking at plants. So that be it. I think that's a good way of catching your breath without others realizing that you're looking at something really interesting and under the guise of, avoiding them to know that you're actually catching your breath. So I'm really thankful to all of you for coming over and listening to this talk. I must, at the outset, I must thank Santaram for initiating me into the plans, in the sense that when I first moved into my newly built house some 15-20 years back, I was asking Santaram as to how to go about planting trees and shrubs which could attract birds, and he was the one who sent me a long list, and also he gave me a seed starter also from Rishi Valley, and suggesting that these seeds could be good to attract birds. So I'm really thankful to Santaram for that. So so this is the brief introduction. I mean, it has been a long journey for me, as Sudhagar said, primarily being a bird watcher, because I moved into a newly built home which had a bit of a garden. I could think of plants also, and that set me onto thinking about the bird attracting plants and so on. And looking at bird attracting plants made me think about native plants, and then about native plants which were here. I looked at Celipedigaram also because of that also. So this talk is I am sorry, 1 minute, please. Yeah, this is the outline of the talk, and hopefully it's now around 11 o'clock, and hopefully we should finish in 45 minutes to 50 minutes, I hope. So these are the various headings under which I'm going to talk to you. Bird pollination and ornithophilia, wherein pollination is done by many families of birds. Some of the important articles which discuss about bird pollination, especially in India, are these three articles. You can see Salim Ali's name is also there. There is just a different Kannan, not Raghupati Kannan. And Santaram's article on Helitirus isora is also there. So let us look at some of the plants which are very much involved in ornithophilia, or rather the bird flowers. So the foremost among those bird flowers is red silk cotton, Sevilavu it is called. It's almost like a mecca for birds, especially nectar feeding birds. So also the next plant in the list, namely Mullumuringa or Erythrina indica. Nearly about 45 species of birds make a they are very much dependent upon on the nectar these flowers offer during the flowering season. Though sometimes especially that of Erythrina is sometimes brief, but at that time they offer a very tempting sugar-rich food which no bird can resist. Especially so because many of the birds which we don't usually associate with nectar feeding also make they come directly to these flowers and feed on the nectar. For example, crows, many bird families which we don't normally associate also are very much attracted to these flowers. The other one is the real flame of the forest. This red silk cotton was seen along the Kanjipuram Chengalpet road. As far as I know, it is not that very common in eastern coastal and central Tamil Nadu. Maybe it's more common towards western Tamil Nadu near the Western Ghats slopes. Do not know whether this is actually Bombax saber or Bombax insigne. The flowers are a bit different in these two. Bootea monosperma is the real flame of the forest. This is fairly commonly distributed. In fact, Purusavakam in Chennai is the name supposed to have originated from the Purasu, which is Bootea. This also is same as red silk cotton as well as Erythrina. These are all good flowers to attract birds. I think many of the old timers here will remember Padinaru Vaidhanale by Bharati Raja, where Sri Devi's song Senduru Puve depicts the flowering of Bootea monosperma. So you can see the famous Salim Ali, famous yellow-throated sparrow feeding upon the Bootea monosperma. So also the coral tree is also very much involved in ornithophily. These flowers also, they have some sort of a within the keel petals of Erythrina, the nectar is hidden, and therefore you need a bird to open the flowers in order to get at the nectar. So here the sunbird is feeding upon the Erythrina, and here you see the golden-fronted leaf bird at the Indian coral tree. We will be discussing about the interactions between the birds and the flowers later in the presentation. But here the just a hint of this, you can see that the sunbird here at the shoe flower is at the base of the flower, are not coming into the flower or approaching the flower through the front of the flower. So obviously it is trying to make a shortcut through the base of the petals to reach the nectar here. This is also a very important bird attracting flower. So this is Heliterius isora. This is what Santaram's article refers to. His article refers to the plants, birds and butterflies visiting Heliterius isora near Mundandurai. So this is also remarked upon by Dr. Sugadhan, one of the senior researchers in BNHS, about that fact that the little sunbird or the crimson-backed sunbird is very much fond of Heliterius isora and makes some sort of alternate migration along the Western Ghats when these flowers are, when these plants are flowering. In our fallow lands and in the scrub lands, you find that this is one of these very interesting plants, and especially the purple sunbirds are very much attracted to the Calotropis flowers, and it's very commonly distributed here. So also here you can see that the sunbird is approaching the flower through the front of the flower, and thereby it is doing its bit of pollination. This is yet another flower which was researched upon by Salim Ali himself about the fact that these the flowers are extremely ornithophilous flowers. That is, flowers which have co-evolved along with the sunbirds in order to suit the sunbird's bill and the curve of the bill also. And these are really perfect ornithophilus flowers because their tips are supposed to open by the bill of the sunbird, and the mere touch of the sunbird's bill, especially some of the Lotan's sunbird's bill, results in an explosive release of pollen from the flowers, and this release of pollen is supposed to result in the pollen sticking to the forehead of these birds. This is another type of Loranthus species seen in the Nilgiris. It's supposed to be Macrosolan parasitica. There is some sort of a confusion. I presented this in flowers of India, and there was some confusion whether is it the previous one or is it Macrosolan. So whatever be it, you can see that the leaf bird, the female Jordan's leaf bird, is feeding at the nectar through the open end of the flower. So some of the birds which are involved, we've already seen many of the birds which are involved. So here is the Nilgiri flower pecker, and this is another yellow colored flower, namely it's called as kumil in Tamil. This is also a strong bird attracting flower. Here you see the purple rumped sunbird feeding on the Melena arborea flowers. So Morinda is also very much into it, and these are, even though these are white in color, many birds are very fond of this nectar. So this is similar to the Melena arborea. This is called as Chinna Kumil in Tamil, and these yellow flowers are very much favored by Lotan's sunbirds. The length of the flowers are almost reminiscent of the Casablanca peruviana or the Thevisia nerifolia, which is the yellow oleander. So yellow oleander is exotic. So this is white gulmohar, which is a native one when compared with the Deileonox regia, which is the common gulmohar. So we're just discussing about the pollination mechanisms between birds and plants, and they have co-evolved. I think each one has influenced the other. The flower has influenced the bird, and bird has influenced the flower also, and they have co-evolved together over eons and multiple years. And it is especially interesting to see where is it located globally. So except for North America, where the hummingbirds migrate in summer and almost they go up to Alaska, rest of the world is only seen in the tropics, especially in Asia. It is seen only south of the Himalayas. And the original pollination syndrome was between bees and flowers, and only then the bird pollination evolved. So how do the birds and flowers interact? So the flowers have adapted to attracting the birds for pollination, and these attraction mechanisms are obvious. So nectar, the bird come for nectar, and therefore the copious nectar, and the flowers are very obvious and present themselves very well to the birds, and therefore they are very much visible to the birds. Not only that, they want the birds to pollinate these flowers and do not want other animals to access the nectar, and therefore they have this exclusion mechanism whereby they prevent the other animals from coming and in search of nectar. So how do you avoid them? You avoid them by preventing them from accessing it. How do you prevent them? So there's no landing platform. So many of these birds are able to hover to some extent, or at least they're able to perch on the adjacent branches or the petioles or the other accessory organs there and access the flower, whereas the insects need a landing platform. So if you have a big flower with a corolla which is very much prominent and these prominent corollas have some sort of a landing platform for these bees and insects. So these landing platform are not there in these bird flowers, and also the corolla is sympetallous, that is the petals have fused together, and it is long and narrow, and it can only admit the bill of the bird and not the entire insect. And often you will find that the corolla lobes are sometimes turned back so that they avoid or prevent the insects from landing on the flowers. You should note that the nectar eating birds in India and tropical and Africa are quite different from the nectar eating birds in the Americas, in the fact that the hummingbirds which are there in the Americas can hover in front of the flower and access the nectar, wherein the nectar feeding birds which are seen in Asia and Africa need a perch, and therefore they need a branch of the tree or the petiole of the flower or adjacent structures. So they have to perch there and access the flower to get at the nectar. So the protection mechanism, why do you have these protection mechanisms? Imagine the bill of the bird is very sharp. It has to be sharp in order to access the nectar, and therefore because of the sharp bill, the ovary of the flower is very much at danger because of damage from the sharp bill, and therefore the ovule and the ovary have to be protected from the sharp bill, and these mechanisms do that. Sometimes you can have an inferior ovary. The ovary is placed downward, and therefore that will protect the ovary from the sharp bill of the bird. So pollination mechanisms. So you can have exerted stamens. As you saw in the erythrina flowers, you will find that uh, the anthers are protruding out. You can see that the anthers or stamens are protruding out. So these protruding stamens are called as exerted stamens. And this exerted stamens means that the bird has no possibility of accessing the nectar without rubbing against these anthers of the stamens, and therefore the pollen is going to stick to the bird's surface of the body. And Salim Ali has mentioned in this article that you have to confirm that whether the bird is really pollinating or not. You have to confirm by perhaps by he shot those birds themselves and found nectar was sticking to the, I mean, sorry, pollen was sticking to the forehead of the birds. You might remember in the fall of sparrow, he has mentioned that he was finding one of the birds which had a peculiar sheen or a color in the forehead of the bird. This was in northeast India, and he was finding it a bit different. He was not sure whether is it a different subspecies or is a different coloration which is different from the rest of India. So you actually shot the bird and found that it was actually only pollen and not actually a true color of the feathers of the bird which was shot at. So this is how you research as to whether the bird is actually pollinating the flower or not. So what are the characters of the flowers? Before this, we discussed about the mechanism which a flower utilizes in order to do its job. Whereas, and what are the actual characters of the flowers? So as I said earlier, they stand out and are conspicuous. So birds have excellent vision, and therefore capitalizing on this excellent vision, these flowers are stand out and are very obvious, and therefore they are easily seen by the birds which may be flying from a long distance and further away also. The color of the flowers. The many of the flowers are accessed by these nectar seeking birds, but predominantly it is scarlet or red color which is being accessed. It has been very much discussed as to what is the reason for the red color of these flowers, and it has been found that the birds all tetrachromats, that is they have four cones in their retina. Cones observe the color vision, and they have four cones in the retina. They also have some oil inside the eye which is also able to help them into seeing more colors than the humans can see. And the spectrum, the maximum spectrum, crosses over to the red end of the visible spectrum. It is around 650 nanometers, whereas if you see that of the bees, it is around 550 nanometers. Therefore, the bees, though they may be accessing the red flowers, they are not able to see the red color as well as the birds do. And therefore, the birds and flowers have co-evolved, and those flowers which want to attract the birds only in order to pollinate them, they'll preferably be red in color so as to attract the maximum number of birds as possible. The other thing is birds have no sense of smell, most birds at least, except for the turkey vulture in Americas, and therefore this nectar is practically odorless. And also most birds which access the nectars are day flying birds, and therefore they are day flowering flowers. And what about the quality of the sugar in the nectar? These are all monosaccharides. So hexose sugars are monosaccharides in contrast to sucrose sugar. What we eat as sugar is sucrose sugar, and sucrose sugar is a disaccharide. And birds are not able to, especially the Nectarinidae and other bird families eating nectar in the Asia and Africa, are not able to eat these hexose sugars, whereas the hummingbirds are able to eat the sucrose sugars, and therefore these flowers in the tropics of the old world, that is in Africa and in Asia, preferably have hexose sugars. There is practically no protein or very little protein there. The nectar is not easily accessible. It is very deep, and it is also very dilute. Why should it be dilute? Because even though these birds have a suctorial adaptation, they are able to suck the nectar, they cannot suck a very viscous thick syrup, and therefore the sugar is dilute, and also it's of voluminous. The voluminous nature relates to the excretory system of the sunbirds also. The sunbirds have a well-developed excretory system. Therefore, they can excrete the excess fluid that they have imbibed from this nectar. Therefore, the birds which have a good excretory system and the flowers which they feed upon will have a copious and a dilute nectar. The pollen obviously has to stick to the bird for it to be attached to the feathers of the birds. So what are the other structural adaptations to suit only ornithophily? So as I said earlier, absence of broad corolla or rim, very tubular and like a funnel, without suitable perches. As I said earlier, insects need perches, and also without nectar guides. You might remember that the commonly flower which is offered for the gods like Tiruvati, that is Bacchinia tomentosa. Tiruvati has those purple throat inside the flower. It's an yellow flower. If you see inside, it has this purple throat. These serve as nectar guides, and all those flowers which have nectar guides are supposed to be meant for insects. So as we discussed earlier, the Loranthaceae family, they open explosively on when the bill of the sunbird touches the flower, and the pollen gets released explosively. We said earlier about the classification of the nectar eating birds based upon that interaction between the with the flowers. So the true pollinators, these species are the true pollinators. What does it mean? That these birds actually feed upon the nectar, and also they transfer the pollen from that flower to another flower, maybe in the same plant or in some other plant, and therefore they are very helpful in producing virile seeds. We all know that self-pollination is supposed to be not less virile, in the sense that the genetic material in the seeds is not as good as in cross-pollination. Therefore, true pollinators subserve cross-pollination and help the plants to produce virile seeds, whereas the other two categories are, the difference is very subtle between a robber and a thief. We usually don't differentiate these two. Robber is one which pollination is not there, but the flower is damaged, and a thief is where pollination is not there and there is also no damage. We shall see some examples right now. You will understand better. Here is a true pollinator, the Indian white-eye, but I could not avoid showing an exotic plant. This is lantana. You can see that the bill of the bird is going through the open front of the flower, and thereby it is pollinating the lantana. Whereas if you see the cork tree, Pannir Maram, you will find that the purple rump sunbird is taking a shortcut. The shortcut is through the base of the flower, and thereby it is accessing the nectar. That means we find that these are not being pollinated by these birds, and you probably know already that many of these plants, like this plant, does not set seed in India. So this is supposed to have originated from Burma, and maybe it set seed in Burma. But here, very rarely do you find seeds, as also in some of the exotics, like in Plumeria. You will find that seeds are not found probably because these plants are not being pollinated effectively. And you will also find here, this is a bird seen in tropical Asia, and you will find it is not hovering, it is sitting on the adjacent branch and feeding upon the flower. So how do these, the other classification is specialist and generalist. So specialist is that one which feeds predominantly on nectar, will also eat insects, and they also have adaptations. So these bills also have adaptations so that they are able to exploit the nectar very well. And the family which is most suited for exploitation are the sunbirds, and the others come after these sunbirds. So which are the generalists? These generalists are mynas, drongos, orioles, and bulbuls, and they lick at nectar. That means that their tongues have not been modified that well enough, and therefore they are only able to lick nectar, and they're not able to suck nectar. For example, if you are eating, say, drinking coconut water, we many of us use the straw to drink the coconut water, or some of us tilt it and drink it through our mouth also. So who knows? So some of the monkeys may be having, I don't know, maybe having a tubular thing. You can see that the lips get pursed, and maybe they do it that way. I don't know. So what are the bill structure? How is the bill structure of these nectariidae? You will find that the bill is sharp, long, and slender, and decurved. So this decurved bill of the sunbird suits the natural tilt of the flowers which the sunbirds access. And what about the tongue? The tongue is almost forming like a tube, like a straw, wherein the tips of the tongue curl like this and almost form a full tube, and therefore they're able to suck at the nectar. And also they have the ability to digest these sugars, and excess water is being excreted. And you should note, many of these flycatchers have these tip of the bill which is curved like this. It's curved extremely in birds of prey, but the hooked bill will not serve its purpose if you're going to insert it into a flower, and therefore these sunbursts don't have a hooked bill tip, and also you don't have bristles. So bristles help birds like, for example, nightjar, and they are very sensitive, and they have to catch insects. Here, though they feed on nectar, insects, their main food is nectar, and therefore they don't have these bristles. So comparing the birds which feed upon nectar, the main birds which have the suctorial apparatus, they feed on all types of flowers. For example, ornithophilous flowers, as well as bat pollinated, as well as entomophilous flowers are being fed upon by the sunbirds. Whereas if you see the other bird families which feed upon these flowers, they mainly feed upon the flowers which are mainly suited for ornithophily. So the sunbirds are also able to exploit the flowers which, for example, if you plant exotics which are mainly suited for the uh, birds in Americas, like the hummingbirds, then the sunbirds are also supposed to hover. Though majority of the sunbirds are not able to hover, in order to access the nectar of extremely ornithorophilous flowers meant only for the hummingbirds, they necessarily have to hover in order to access the nectar. So that having come to an end to of the ornithophily. Now we are moving to plant-bird interactions of frugivory. I believe Patrick has joined this presentation, and I depended to some extent on Patrick's paper on frugivory of birds in Sriharikota, and this is probably relevant to many of you in Chennai, because Chennai is very close to Sriharikota, and the plants there which are suited for frugivory are probably of much relevance to people in Chennai. So endozoochory is where the birds which eat those fruits and the seeds which pass through the gut of the birds come out through the cloaca of the birds. So this is where the seeds are transported through the abdomen and out through the cloaca. So this is endozoochory. So these are the references, as I said. So one is by Patrick, and the other is by about fruit colors in tropical Asia. So these are some of the frugivore families, and they are all very well distributed in Chennai and all over Tamil Nadu also. Are the families of plant families which are suited for frugivory. So I've given the common name as well as the scientific name. And the colors, the red, black, and yellow are mostly the colors which are meant for frugivory. We were discussing about the color of the flowers which are suited for ornithophily, and we were saying that red is the most common color which is suited for ornithophily. Similarly, here also red and black color are the most important colors suited for fruits also. And there have been several. The second paper in this was discussing about the fruit color preference, the one of the differences I said between hummingbirds and the sunbirds of India and Africa is that sunbirds prefer flowers with hexose sugar, that is glucose and fructose, whereas the uh, hummingbirds prefer flowers with sucrose, that is a disaccharide. So the all the bee pollinated flowers also have sucrose, and therefore it is clearly established that the ornithophily in the Americas is derived from bee pollinated flowers, whereas if you find in the flowers in Asia and in Africa, they have only hexose sugars, and these hexose sugars are exploited by the sunbirds. So how do you explain this discrepancy? So it is explained that the birds in Asia were mostly probably dependent upon the fruits, and fruits you all know, fruity oats because of ketones and fructose, and therefore probably the ornithophily in Asia and Africa was derived from frugivory, and therefore as a corollary the flowers also have hexose sugars, and thereby that is a link between these fruits and flowers. So the size also. So the size is very important. So in the initial days when I was planting in plants in my garden, I studiously avoided all the plants with big fruits. For example, no guava. One reason is because it is not a native. The other reason is because it has a very large fruit. No mango because it is a large fruit, and therefore because of this gap size of these common birds, I avoided these two. Of course, there are other reasons which I did not know about that time, and I stand corrected right now. And mango is a very good plant to have, but for birds to access these large size fruits, then it has to be eaten either by a parrot or by a quail, or after fruit gets softened to that extent, only then these small birds like bulbuls can access these fruits. Otherwise, these small birds cannot access these fruits. So what about the seeds, frugivory? So the germination success of these seeds which pass through the bird gut is supposed to be far better than if the fruits fall down at the base of the plant. So what is the reason for that? there is a modification of the seeds by the bird's gut itself. The gastric juices and the intestinal juices soften the seed coat of the seeds and thereby help in the germination. And also, there could be nutrients in the fecal matter. So, this was in fact studied in a paper which compared the germination of the seeds which pass through the bird's gut as well as fruits which are uh, taken from the plant and planted. There was some discrepancy. Some studies said that there was no difference in the germination success between these two, and some which said that there was a difference in the germination between seeds which are got from the birds, which germinated better than the seeds which are from the plant direct. So this discrepancy is being explained by the fact that when comparing it, you should plant the whole fruit if you are taking it from the plant itself, and not the seed. You should not separate the seed, because the in nature the whole fruit falls down, because the fruit pulp is supposed to be having inhibitory influences on the seed. So the fruit has to be removed for the seed to be germinating better. So that could be the explain the difference in the those studies which found that there was a difference in the germination success between these two seeds. So the seeds falling at the base will not germinate because there is some sort of inhibitory influence of the mother tree on the seeds which have fallen down at the base of the mother tree. For example, you know very well that tigers will drive away their young ones, especially the male young ones, away from the parents' area. So these are the top 5 plants for frugivore in Sriharikota as per Patrick's study. I shall discuss about one or two. I don't have photos of Ficus amplissima or of Ficus microcarpa. This tree is very important. Salvadora persica. Those of you might have used the Meswak toothpaste also. The Meswak toothpaste is common all over North India, but it is not common in Tamil Nadu. I don't know, many of you might remember about Rajinikanth's film Alum Velum Pallu Kurdi, or the old saying Alapol, Velapol. So that song shows that we were all dependent upon Al and Vel for brushing our teeth, and we were not dependent upon Salvadora. But still, Salvadora is present in Tamil Nadu. The classic literature is that it is a littoral species found along the coast, just inside the shoreline. Whereas, to my surprise, I found this in a sacred grove near Pudukkottai, which is at least 100 kilometers away from the shore. And you should see the acrobatics of these birds. Almost like you might remember the old advertisement about children falling upon gems like anything. And these birds were really acrobatic and really they were in a frenzy feeding on the fruits. And this Salvador is supposed to produce sterile fruits. I'm not sure about the reason why they produce sterile fruits. And these sterile fruits are very much sought after by these sunbirds. So it's a very important tree to have in your place, and this is very useful. So it remains to be seen. I mean, you have to see it to see the frenzy these birds go into. So you can see the hanging down almost like monkeys feeding upon those Salvador persica. The other tree is Udian or Lania coromandelica. There was another important paper by Dr. Balasubramanian from SACON on the frugivore in Point Calimere, in which he talks about Lania coromandelica. It's an important tree in Point Calimere also. So this is a tree which fruits during the hot summer, and crows are very fond of these trees also. So this is the brown-headed barbet and the Indian ash tree. And you should see the coal feeding. This photo taken from a garden. The tree above is the karuvepla, that is the curry leaves, and the plant below is the Rauwolfia tetraphylla, that is called as Pambukala. Rauwolfia serpentina is a medicinal plant producing reserpine, which is used for hypertension. So both these plants were planted by me. Initial days, I sometimes missed seeing whether is it a native plant or an exotic plant. I planted them. and the one below is an exotic plant. Rauwolfia tetraphylla is an exotic plant. And to my surprise, you can see that these flowers, fruits are luscious, looking red in color. And you might remember about the quail's feeding habits. There have been several articles in Black Buck and also in JBNHS about the feeding behavior of quails on the toxic, poisonous fruits of yellow oleander. Even though they are poisonous and supposed to be very toxic to human beings, they are not toxic to the quails. So maybe the quails in my place have not yet learned whether these fruits are good or not. Since then, I have had this plant removed from a garden. So the quail, we'll discuss that later. Quail is very much fond of these curry leaves, and it feeds extensively on these fruits. So some of the other birds which feed upon these birds are the barbets. Barbets are peculiar when compared with the other frugivores in that they mainly feed upon the ficus plants, whereas bulbuls feed upon other fruits also. So thanks to Dr. Ramaji for this photograph. This is yellow white bulbul feeding upon the probably neem fruit. So this is Flugia leucopyrus. Hornbills, I'm sorry, bees are very much fond of the nectar from Flugia, and they are feeding upon it. These white fruits, so here is a fruit which is white in color. This is a very important plant as a attracting birds, especially the white-browed bulbul, as well as yellow-throated bulbul. And therefore, this is an exception to the fact that it is not red in color, and still they attract the birds. So the coppersmith barbet, as I said earlier, it is mostly dependent upon the ficus fruits. Here is white eye feeding upon lantana, and we find that lantana is very much spread by the lantana is very much spread by white eye. So black-hooded oriole, another frugivorous bird, hornbill. Hornbills are very important. They very much dependent upon one of the lipid-rich fruits which are seen in the Western Ghats, namely the family Laraceae. A typical example of Laraceae is the cinnamon lavanga pattai. So these Laraceae fruits are very much sought after by these hornbills. So Mulluvenge or Bredalia is also one of the important frugivorous frugivores. Ficus hispida and Pirandai, fairy bluebird and yellow-browed bulbul there also. So coming to the keystones, that is the ficus plants or the keystone species. Keystone, we all know, is an important piece of structure within the arch on which the entire strength of the arch depends. And any forest is important for these ficus species, which are form the keystone species. Why are they key important keystone species? Because of the abundant fruits, and also because of the asynchronous fruiting. That means if you see neem, mostly they fruit around April. Sometimes two periods are there. So most of the plants have only a single fruiting period, whereas ficus have asynchronous. That is, they fruit throughout the year. One plant fruits in February, another will fruit in April, and thereby they give fruits to all birds within that forest. And so many animals and birds are dependent upon that. So you find any habitat, even stone, for example, the Sthalavraksham of Tiruparankuram temple is Kal-Al or Kallichi, and it means that is even grows in rocky habitats, and therefore any habitat is game for these ficus species. And so much of it is some sort of a all these plants are made for each other. They go hand in hand, and these they are pollinated by this blastophaga wasps also. So you also have religious kind of connections. All the Hindus worship the ficus trees, and also it is said that if you want to create a forest, you plant at least many ficus species, and these ficus species will attract the bats there, and these bats might have fed upon other fruits also, and when coming over to these ficus plants, they will also pass their excreta all along the way, and this excreta will create a forest, and therefore birds and bats themselves can create a forest if you plant ficus species. If you one of the important ficus, though it's not called as ficus, is a Strabulus asper, that is called as Kanupalai or in Pirayan Maram. So Pirayan Maram is mentioned by Manika Vasagar in in the olden literature in Tiruvasagam, saying that it is a very hardy tree, and Manika Vasagar discuss about his mind and the Strabulus tree trunk. He says that is also very strong. My mind is also very strong. That is Pirai போல என்னோட மனம் இருக்கு. That is, both of them were very strong. That is what Manika Vasagar says. So there is also religious connection to Pirayan Maram, and therefore if you are afraid of planting a ficus tree which occupies a huge space, so there is another Moraceae plant, Strabulus asper, which is a good plant to attract fruit-eating birds, especially green pigeons. So also atti and also starlings. So many of these birds, if the fruit is very large, they may peck at the fruit, or if the fruit is very small, they can eat it whole. So here it is occupying a huge space, the banyan tree. So this art book is very important and discusses about the fact that forests can be recreated by planting ficus trees. So coming on to seed predators. So we also have seed predators like these parakeets, wasteful birds. Why they are wasteful, I'm not very sure about that. You need to study about the ecology. They sometimes drop all the fruit. They also eat the seeds also, and therefore they are seed predators. So also munias also. So coming to the interaction between the insects and the native plants, you might remember I was discussing about I avoided mangoes and other big fruits in my garden. That is to the detriment of my garden. Only recently, for the past 2 years, I have come to realize that mango is also an important plant, and it could also be called as a uh, keystone species, because the reasons I'll discuss about later. So because there is a strong link between insects, native plants, and nestling bird food. You might remember, in fact, Sudhakar himself has given an interview about the sparrows. What is the reason for the reduction in the numbers of sparrows? One of the reasons quoted is the fact that uh, sparrows feed their young ones with the insect food, especially caterpillars, and therefore if you don't have native plants here, therefore there's a dearth of caterpillars, and therefore the sparrows are not able to find food for their nestlings, and that could be one reason, one of the important reasons for the reduction in number of the sparrows also. So these are some of the articles which discuss about the link between the birds and the native plants. So they find that nearly about, especially blue tit is a much studied bird in whole of Europe as well as in England, uh, and they find that 70 diet of the nestlings of the blue tits are constituted by the caterpillars. So caterpillars form a strong percentage of the food eaten by these birds, and therefore it is very important that we understand the link between these two and take steps to improve the native plants there. This revelation struck me when I was looking around uh, a book to give as a gift to one of the important bird watchers and bird lovers, and I was struck by the discussion between discussion by Ptolemy, discussing about the link between the insectivorous birds as well as the native trees. So what is the link between these two? So I'm just giving an example of two yellow colored flowers, plants which are found commonly in India. And as far as I know, It is extremely rare to have a household in the whole of Tamil Nadu having Acacia auriculata. Acacia auriculata is Avarampu. I don't know, old timers might remember this song in Tannir Tannir. So it goes on like this. ஆவாரம்பூ ஆறில நாச்சு அப்படின்னு ஒரு பாட்டு வருது. So look at the number of aphids, the insect feeding upon the aphids, and the leaf cut into half by the some insect which is fed on this plant. And look at the pristine nature of this plant. This is Tangarali, and these days there is no household, no temple in Tamil Nadu without this plant. Why? I don't know. Because probably because of the nursery trade, they want pristine looking flowers, they want pristine looking leaves. Nothing wrong with that, but I think every one of us have to be, we ourselves have to be educated, and in turn educate others about the role of these native plants, and what these native plants fulfill, what is the role they have in the ecological system. And it is E.O. Wilson, the famous naturalist from the United States, the little things that make life. He is talking about the insects and the important role played by these insects, and this has been taken upon by Douglas Talamy, discussing about the role these native plants in the scheme of things in any ecosystem. So you find that these that is Talamy goes on to say that if you compare a native plant and an exotic plant, you will find insects which are dependent upon a native plant is very numerous, and it is in no way comparable to an exotic plant. He's saying, for example, an exotic eucalyptus plant can be at the most have 3 insects dependent upon it, whereas a native plant will have at least hundreds of insects dependent upon it. So such is the difference between native plants and exotic plant. And therefore, if you have a native plant, you will have so many insects, and thereby you can have so many insects and birds dependent upon it. So also caterpillars also. So caterpillars form an important part of the diet of these young ones. So for example, this is the egg of a commander butterfly. Sorry to say, but I am not into butterflies to that extent, but I primarily see butterflies and moths as insect food, especially their caterpillars as insect food. And Viludi or Cadaba fruticosa is a very common native plant, especially in scrubland, and you can see the eggs of these commander butterflies are laid upon this Cadaba. Similarly, on banana, the palm red lays its eggs on. So what does Douglas Talamy says? So he is not equating all the native plants. He says some native plants are more special compared with other native plants. So he calls these special native plants as the hubs of any airline. For example, if you take, for example, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, and Calcutta. So these are the hubs in the airline map of India. And if it is not mentioned here, if you think of Madurai and Tuticorin here, hardly the number of flights which come in and go out from Madurai and Tuticorin are very few. Similarly, he says there are some plants, native plants, which support a huge number of insects, and other native plants which support a very less number of insects. So supposing your garden has very little space and you can plant only 1 or 2 trees, then you should choose a tree which can be called as a hub, whereas it attracts so many insects, and therefore you should plant these hubs here and not anything else. So this is data that I extracted from iFound Butterflies website, thinking of the number of common plants I put up across here, which support the maximum number of butterflies. So if you see we have discussed some of the plants here. For example, we'll discuss about Indian caper, Indian laburnum, flame with the forest also. So these are some of the plants which support maximum number of butterflies. In other words, even if you think of some of these native plants, so-called native plants in India, you can find out whether is it really native to India by looking at the number of insects dependent upon it. Many of the moth lovers here, I have seen about uh, Yuvan, Mahati, and others also. For example, Vikas also, they are very much into moths. So this much of data on the larval host plants of butterflies is not there in moths. So when you compare the number of butterflies in India, which is about 4,000, the number of moths in India, which is about 12,000, you can find that if you draw out a similar list for the moths, then you can see which are the hubs in as far as moths are concerned. And therefore, if you plant those hubs, then you are sure to attract more insects and then more birds also. That also will follow. For example, what is much touted upon is about neem. If you find the most common tree in the Indian Tamil Nadu cities, you'll find in Madurai it is pungan as well as in neem, and probably in Chennai it is the rain tree and probably pungan also and neem also. So if you find the number of butterflies dependent upon neem, there is hardly one. I don't know about Mars. The Indian visible is supposed to be lays eggs on neem also, and therefore it is not, as far as bird friendly garden, it is not that important for planting in your garden. There's also, I don't know whether you call it as a myth or otherwise, that the oxygen is given by neem when compared to other plants. Some botanists, core botanists, say that plants give out oxygen. Any plant will give out oxygen as much as the other plant also. So the protein for these bird nestlings and insects is this insect protein. So here is the crimson rose on Kadaba, the Vididi. So also the common orange tip on Kadaba. So another plant which I found in Madurai, especially along the paddy fields, is Hygrophila, which is called as a Neer Mulli. So this is also important. So these are some of the birds which feed upon these insects, and obviously it indicates that is very important, especially for the resident birds in our locality. So you cannot attract birds which are not local to your area. So you can only attract those plants which are local to your area. And therefore, these plants, native plants, are very much necessary. The other thing is about the plant-bird interactions, in the sense that the trunks of the trees are very much necessary for whole birds as well as a base for the nests also. And therefore, it's best to at least keep these plants where the dead branches are left behind, so that they can be utilized by these birds in order to make their nests also. So what are the guidelines for a bird-friendly garden? So these are some of the guidelines. In a large commercial area, at least some part of it can be left open. I'm not saying that you should not plant pomegranate, you should not plant guava. So at least 1% of your garden, if you give over to natives, then it will be very much useful to birds. So live and let live. See, you also eat your produce. So many of them, supposing eat mango, the household people, your wife, your mother will say, "Namma veetla valandadu appadinu." So they say. So there is always that much of importance attached to the fruit which comes from your own garden. Therefore, you have both kinds of plants, and therefore you live and also let live. And also this sort of vertical layering, which is what I have learned recently. If you see, my garden is fully packed with the main big trees, and hardly find space for herbs and shrubs and sunshine, which is not there that much in our garden. And also viewing gallery. If you look out at our house, the many of the windows are not suited for viewing birds out there. We find that a lot of birds and insects are there in a garden, but if you go out into the garden, they are sometimes or run away. Sometimes the babblers do not run away, but other birds run away, and therefore you should have some sort of a hide itself at the viewing windows, so that you are able to watch them unobtrusively, so that they don't go away. And also a lawn. Lawn is a water guzzler, and please try to ready. Of course, if you want it, you have it, but do not have a maximum large space as a garden, and try not to mow at least a part of the lawn, so that you have some spaces for insects and other creatures to hide. So, and also the portion of the garden should be untended and not pruned, so that, as I said, you have sticks and other things for birds to nest also. And also this leaf litter forms a part of your garden, and it allows the water to be soaked up in your garden, so that the trees also benefit, and also even in dry areas you have water there available for the plants also. So what are the suitable plants? So as I said earlier, almost I'm obsessed and vehemently talk about native plants, and therefore native plants are very much necessary. Some people are not able to differentiate between native plants and naturalized plants. They equate naturalized plants with native plants. For example, Lantana camera is a naturalized plant. Why do we call it as naturalized plant? Because the plant is self-propagating. It has found a suitable seed disperser in the form of birds. It has found suitable pollinators like butterflies, and therefore it is able to thrive in our area. It has become an invasive plant in our area because it is able to spread by itself, and therefore it is called as a naturalized plant. It doesn't mean it is a native plant. So that difference has to be kept in mind. So here they say, so the herbivore diversity is not all non-natives are not equally unequal. That means that you have hubs in these native plants also. So why not non-native attractive plants? Many people, sometimes even people who talk about special taxa, talk about planting Lantana camara. Supposing if you ask them, why do you want to plant native lantana? It's an invasive plant. They say it is a hybrid, and therefore it doesn't set fruit. And therefore, why don't you plant it? It attracts birds. The concept of short-term gain, and for example, what shall I say, day trading in the stock market, it has become so much commonplace in our country, and I think all of us should become investors, and not short-term traders. We should plan for the long term also. So what is the point of having a plant which flowers but does not set seed? That means you want to have children, but you don't want the plants to have children. In what way are you right in depriving them of their own children? So here comes the what shall I say, the the other way of looking things, looking at plants from the plant's point of view, and not from your point of view. So that I think will be useful in thinking about it. So other thing is Singapore cherry. Any nursery, if you go and you say, I want to attract birds to my plant, I want to hear birds, then people say, why don't you have lovebirds? Or why don't you plant this Singapore cherry tree? There are so many names to it. It is not from Singapore. It is from South America, and many birds are very much attracted to this Singapore cherry. For example, the flower peckers, especially the pale-billed flower peckers, very much attracted to the Singapore cherry. And I think I've been suggesting, I don't have the time for it. Uh, that Singapore cherry is very much favored by the pale-billed flower pecker. Maybe they have forgotten to feed upon the mistletoe or the loranthus. So loranthus is no longer being spread by these flower peckers, and probably loranthaceae are dying out in all the man involved areas. So berry only support adults, do not support plants. And also the insect biomass which is supported by these native plants is so enormous when compared with non-natives. So this may be unpublished. Also, he also goes on to say that imagine if you only depend upon the protected areas, for example, say Gindi National Park or say Mudumalai, in order to support or cater to birds, then these places are constitute only a small percentage of our land. Compare, and he goes on to say that a major part of the United States of America is owned by private people. So also, for example, in entire eastern Tamil Nadu, if you leave alone the hilly areas, all of it is privately owned. If many of us privately owned people come together and plant native at least in 1% of our land, imagine so much of space for these native plants and so much of fruits and flowers from these native plants, and so much of almost it will come to what Nammalwar keeps on used to say, at least, about Uyir Valley. That is, you have a biofence where you have local plants which will support insects as well as birds, and therefore they come to your balance. So you have uh, insects feeding upon plants or even your own crop, as well as birds feeding upon those insects, and therefore everything is kept in a balance. No toxins are given into the garden, no fertilizers, I mean inorganic fertilizers, no pesticides, no weedicides are being used. Therefore we probably will live longer, and no malignancies or cancers will also develop. Therefore, and we should also follow what has been published about the Western Ghats, about what Nature Conservation Foundation has also published about the role of the small lots of native plants within the coffee plantations and the tea plantation, and how much they are form a bridge or link between various protected areas, and where these are also very important for our birds also. So similarly, supposing if you think of say Chennai, and if you have Guindy National Guindy National Park, you not only have Guindy National Park, you don't have any other protected area in Chennai, and therefore, if you think of other campuses, if people could get convinced that at least 1% of the campus could be given over to native plants, then at least then we could have some amount of continuity between Guindy National Park and other places, and thereby you could have some amount of protection. So when you want to plant suitable plants, so this should be the guiding principle. Look for win-win situation hubs. For example, curry leaves. So you want to convince people, you want to convince your college authorities, you want to convince everyone in order to plant native plants. So I have realized that one of the very important household plants which are daily used is curry. So Kariveple is offers bird fruits for quail and red-vented bulbul. They are so much fond of it. It's a host for 2 or 3 larval host plant for butterflies. Butterflies also feed upon the nectar, and also it's also fit for human consumption. The other thing is about humans, mangoes. So mangoes is meant for at least 10 species of butterflies, as well as 2 species of moths feed upon these plant leaves. And also mangoes are used for human consumption. I don't know what is the difference between a wild grown mango, which is usually not favored for eating, as well as, say, for example, Banganapalli or Malgova or Imam Pasand. So whether there is any difference between these two, I'm not very sure about it. The other suitable plant could be drumstick, where human consumption as well as nectaring for sunbirds, as well as for is a larval host plant for several moths also. Echinacea species. Here, I mean, the best plant will be where the flower offers nectar for birds as well as fruits for birds. So there are some plants, I suppose, but here is a plant which Echinacea we are called as Ardali, which gives fruits for birds, as well as a nectaring plant for birds, as well as a nectaring plant for a larval host plant for several butterflies. So another thing is Butia, which is an important bird nectar plant, as I said earlier, and also larval host plant for butterflies. Calotropis procera. All of us are very much fond of Pillayar. So any function that we start, don't start any function. But why is it that we don't have calotropist at home? Why you want Ganesha at home? You want the elephant at the zoo and at the national park, not near your farm. But you want Ganesha at home. You don't want Irka at home. You don't want elephant nearby also. Of course, elephant is sometimes if you cross our path, it can cause harm definitely. Similarly, calotropist also is, as an ophthalmologist, I should submit that the calotropist juice, sometimes called as madar juice in North India, is toxic to the cornea of the eye. Therefore, when you handle the calotropist, then you should be careful that you are wearing goggles, otherwise it will damage your eye. So, but why don't we have it at home? So, very common in the wasteland. Purple sunbursts are very much fond of calotropist. As we said earlier, all of our households have Tangarali, but they don't have Acacia auriculata, that is Avarambu. Why not? Why not? I mean, there is too much of saying about the other thing. How to convince people from people growing plants is by thinking about the link between plants and the nakshatrams. So nakshatram is also all the nakshatram have a suitable tree, and all of them are, except maybe for tamarind, all of them are native plants, and therefore you can also convince people to have native plants in this way also. So look for win-win situation in all these situations. And also I think we are way behind other countries in studying the relationship between myself included, because of maybe other preoccupations, link between native plants and insects and moth hubs. For example, I said that I found the LHP plants for the butterflies in I found butterflies. Similarly, there's a moth website also, but in the butterfly website you find that the larval host plants are categorized plant family wise as well as butterfly family wise, whereas for the moths you find, as far as I know, you find that it is categorized only from the moth families. So it means that the last has not been said about moths. That means many of us, the number of people who look at moths is very small, and therefore we are not aware of the moth families. We are not, myself included. I am sorry that I have not uploaded any moth during the moth week, which was celebrated recently in September. So I think all of us should spend more time on moths and what role they play in the environment, and thereby identify the hubs which are the moth hubs, and plant those moth hubs, and thereby help our birds in order to. I must be very thankful to all the MNS members, Dr. Santaram, Sudhakar, Vijay, and Umesh, and also Ramaji, as well as Dr. Manivanan and Prasanna, for giving their photographs and helping me in this regard. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I hope I haven't taken that much of your time. I had to rush through a bit, so thankfully I have completed reasonably well in time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, really. Thank you very much. And I think everybody enjoyed it, because let me read the last comment that will put everybody's enjoyment in perspective. An eye opener on such important issues. I feel you can make it a curriculum for school children up to 10th standard. My school days, I didn't read or hear about these points told by you, doctor. Fascinating and engrossing talk. Lots of inputs put in an amazingly simple way. Thank you, sir. This is from Vasant, and similar sentiments have been expressed by several people who have felt that they're very enjoyable, eye-opening, very informative, exhaustive, useful information, etc. So I think the chat box is full of accolades, and because you have not, in your presentation, given an opportunity for anybody to raise a question, you have covered everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
So nobody has a query for you, excepting very early in your talk, somebody asked, what plants will you recommend for small gardens to attract birds in Chennai? And I think you have finally covered that too and said
Yeah,
what
yeah.
are the, yeah. Unless you want to add something which is very specific to Chennai, but I don't think there is anything very specific to Chennai as compared to Madurai. But unless you want to answer
Yeah, but
that, yeah.
I think Patrick's list is exhaustive, but I think in a very small garden, I think we should go by the needs of the family also, and I think here you should look for win-win situation. As I said earlier, many of us have mangoes. Limes are also very important. They attract birds as well as flowers, and as butterflies also. So to start with, lime and karvepalai and mango are very important trees to start with, and thereby, I mean, I made a mistake of not planting mango to start with. That probably I don't have a mango, I don't have guava, I don't have a pomegranate, I don't have lime, so things like that. So I mean, you have learned in the process of planting. You learn. So and whatever I have learned, I think 3/4 to 4/5 of what I have learned is from books and articles and things like that, and probably 1/5 is my whatever observation that I have done. So and it's been good learning and good experience of looking at other people's discussions. And I mean, there are very few people who have commented upon Talami's remarks, saying that there are insects and which are dependent upon exotics also. For example, in India, as far as even MNS is concerned, I think Dr. Geeta Geeta Jayakumar and Dr. Alaganandam have described about the tawny coaster feeding upon Turnera subulata. I think a Passifloraceae family. I think one has to realize that the Passifloraceae family as well as Cactaceae family are, most of it is exotic as far as India is concerned, especially Cactaceae. And as far as I could see, Passifloraceae family, there is a plant called as, I hope I am correct, which is seen along the Western Ghats, which is a Passifloraceae. All other Passifloraceae members are exotics. For example, Passiflora fetida, அந்த ஒரு முசு முசுக்க மாதிரி ஃப்ளவர்ஸ் ஃப்ரூட்ஸ் இருக்கும். So that is supposed to be favored by this tawny coaster. It is an exotic from, and it is any wasteland, if you see, it is occupied by this Passifloraceae. So I mean, what was the percentage of tawny coasters in our land before Winter Blitz area, Winter Blitz time? I don't know. Winter Blitz has recorded tawny coaster. Whether only butterfly enthusiasts have to say whether the tawny coaster has increased in numbers over the past 300 years or so. So that will tell us as to what is the impact and exotic plants have had on butterfly diversity. So also, for example, the Puro, Purot or Puro, I'm not very sure. This feeds upon Kalanchoe plant, and every garden has a Kalanchoe plant, and therefore Kalanchoe plant, butterflies dependent upon Kalanchoe have also increased tremendously. So that also has to be thought in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. I don't think there are any more questions for you. I don't see.
Vijay, one question is just coming.
Okay. How do birds select location for roost? Seen large number of birds from few species select trees and next to the road, which is busy.
I think they choose for places which are relatively safe, and some birds seem to prefer areas where it is close to human habitation. For example,
Right.
crows and mynas prefer places which are close to human habitation, and other birds prefer places which are away from human habitations. So I think for roosting and for nesting is different. That has to be talked about. Whereas because roosting birds can easily fly away, whereas nesting birds leave their young ones at mercy. For example, nesting Baya weaver birds will always nest where there is protection. For example, they nest along places which are, especially trees which are hanging over water. They nest in those areas. So that probably a difference is there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know.
Any village place, if you go there, I think there are a lot of mosquitoes. I mean, a lot of mynas which choose those places in the what is called a sanda, where in the middle of the village they roost particularly there.
There's a question, what are the seeds of native plants that we can collect? Can you list a few?
I think one of the guidelines which what I have done is look at the place names. For example, Purasavakam. Purasavakam, look at say Purasu trees is a native to that area. Look at temples in that area. So which are the temples there? What is the Sthalavraksham of that temple there? So for example, Punnai, I mean not Punnai, Padiri Maram, that is Stereospermum suvalens is the Sthalavraksham of Padi temple, Padi Shiva temple. Therefore, I think that's a tree which ought to be there in most of at least Chennai, which is practically not there. I think so that could be chosen. And also try to visit those sacred groves in and around Chennai and see. For example, people, there have been several reports about big trees in Chennai hospitals. For example, Padmini, that Dr. Padmini, I think, has discussed about several trees in Tirivika Park as well as Women's Hospital in Egmore, Children's Hospital in Egmore, where these many interesting trees are found in those hospitals. Similarly, I have myself posted an e-flora of India about a tree which is native to southeast Tamil Nadu as well as Sri Lanka. That is Beria cardifolia. Beria cardifolia is distributed, is seen along one of the third road or fourth road of Gandhinagar. Gandhinagar near that Ayyappan temple. And therefore, look around for those temples. I think e-flora of India is also a good guide for whatever people have. Dr. Padmini, I don't, she's a doctor, I think. So I think that could be a guideline. And also, I think looking at no point in planting trees which are native to Tamil Nadu but not native to Chennai. No point in planting it in Chennai. So I think any tree which is probably native to the plains of Tamil Nadu probably could find a place in Chennai. But Western Ghats slopes probably should be avoided. But I think the best guide are these temples and Sthalavrakshams as well as the name places also. For example, you have a place called as Ilipakudi, Ilipapatti. So these places are Usilambatti. Usilambatti is famous because of in a song recently, a long time back rather. And it's famous for also because place name indicates Usilai Maram was very much common in Usilambatti. Therefore, etymology of place names also, you should also look into it. And those trees would be a good thing to start with. And obviously, for example, Chennai, I said about Sri Harikota. Sri Harikota is close to Chennai, and Dr. Patrick's paper is a good thing to start with also. The plants that he has mentioned there could be good to have in Chennai also. Thank you.
Thank you. There one question, are there any government nurseries that give native plant saplings? Well,
I think
I can
Nilal's what about Nilal's nursery? I think if Dr. Shobha Menon, if she is or Chitra, she here, both of them are very much interested in native plants, and they've been propagating native plants in Chennai for a very long time under Nilal. I think Chennaiites also could also, for example, Talami's ideas. For example, you could choose Koturubaram Park, which has been the handiwork of Nidal. Compare the plans, say in Koturubaram Park, say with the park in, say in what block is that? In T Nagar. Forgot the name of the park. So any other park, you can take it for, I mean, compare the birds which are found there. Look at only the native birds and not the migrant birds, because Chennai could be a stopover point or a refueling point for many of the birds which go to Sri Lanka. So therefore, look at the birds present there during April, May, June. So those are the native birds.
Dr. Natesan Park in T Nagar.
Natesan Park. So
Yeah.
compare the birds seen in these two places, or for that matter, in where Auroville Botanical Garden and have worked in Adayar Park also, and
Correct.
compare the
Yeah.
birds there. That could be helpful to start you. I mean, you also, I mean, no point in reinventing the wheel. I mean, you know how a wheel runs, but at least to brief 1 month study or comparing the birds in these two places, or say two households or two gardens. One garden which is a formal garden fully filled with exotics. Another is a garden which has at least 5 of the 10 trees are there are native trees. So you compare this two gardens and see for yourself what is the bird life in this one and what is the bird life in the other one, and then go about it. But what about the nurseries? Nurseries having it, I think.
No, there is one, Doctor, I just would like to mention, there is on Radhakrishnan's, which is the opposite the old woodlands, drive-in woodlands, which is now called Semmori Punga. Opposite to that is the Tamil Nadu Horticulture Department.
Okay.
If you contact them, they help in
Okay.
procuring and getting, and even, they also help you to try and, they teach you. Of course, Niral's Kottapuram Urban Forest, I do not know whether they give you saplings, but I think you
Okay.
can get a few. And like Gayatri has suggested, Arun and Thiruvannamalai.
Yeah,
And
Arun. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Arun and Thiruvannamalai.
Arun Thiruvannamalai as well as
Auroville is
Auroville.
another place where you can get.
Yeah. But the other thing is about the horticultural department. I mean, as far as the native plants are concerned, cultivars. Cultivar is a type of a plant where it has been chosen because of its attractive flowers or because of its attractive size. For example, there are several cultivars of Ixora coccinea, which is red colored flower. It's Tamil, it is called as Vechi Poo, and it is supposed to be very much important for people going to war. So before they go to war, they use a garland made of Vechi Poo before they go to the war. So that is supposed to give them protection and also help them in winning the war. So this Vechi Poo is supposed to be a bird attractant flower, not and a fruit. The fruits are red colored and eaten by birds. But if you see all the cultivars of Ixora, none of them set fruit.
Okay.
So, I mean, depending upon the horticultural people also, sometimes they, you want fruits without seeds, or if you want flowers which are sterile. So this is the mindset amongst our own people. So we want flowers which no fruits, and vice versa also. If you are dependent upon the fruits, you want fruits without seeds. So you cannot use the seeds at all. You cannot regrow the plant. So if such people, horticulture people, if you're dependent upon them, then you will have no fruits at all. I mean, you have to think twice, thrice about whether to choose cultivar or do your own work, collect those seeds. And I have Ixora at my home. I never seen it fruiting. Only once have I seen Ixora fruiting, but I could not collect. I collected the seeds, but I could not regenerate, make them germinate at all. I mean, it's very difficult. I think I have found, and also seeds, it's not very easy. We have to give it to the horticultural people, again depend upon them to regenerate, to make them germinate. It's very difficult. How to germinate the seeds also is tricky business.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
Welcome.
Very good afternoon to all. My name is Sundaram from Chennai, and I have been introduced by Badri sir, Dr. Badri. I'm also talking through forum only to sir the first time. It's regarding the native tree plants. We have just created one forum where the Tamil Nadu Tourism, the chairman and the current chairman and commissioner is TP Rajesh. I think I've landed up in the right place today through Dr. Badri. We have initiated a few things like native tree park in tourist locations wherever mostly like 6 locations we have identified like region wise. In fact, we are working on it, and I need some guidance through our forum also. Like if you guys can help us out, and we can take it to the next levels, especially like native tree. No, we want to rehabilitate. We don't want to lose any trees. Like and that government is also in keen, especially Mr. Rajesh. He is IAS officer, and he is the current commissioner, come the secretary to the tourism. And if guys can help us out to take it to the next level by planting these trees in good tourist spots, and we can work on it. Like any. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Badri, for inviting me to this forum.
Thank you, Sundaram ji. Looking forward to interact with you. Whatever I know about plants, definitely I am free to. I am willingly would like to share with you, and we'll take it forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah,
I am
and one
thankful to Rajesh ji also for this initiative. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, sir. And one more thing regarding this Pulicat, what in the initial of the meeting we discussed. And I am basically a marine engineer who sailed for 17 years, and I'm with the IRS now, Indian Register of Shipping. It's a classification body, autonomous body of Government of India. I'm looking after the entire Tamil Nadu coast and half of Andhra till Krishnapatnam port. In the initial meeting, we were discussing about Pulicat and the dredging activities and all. Like this also has been discussed in the meetings with Tamil Nadu Tourism, and it is about like they want to this place, but there is some challenges because the local fishermen have issues. When we go for a dredging, a lot of areas, it's been getting disturbed. So this is also we are working on it. So that is what in the initial of the meeting people were discussing about that Pulicat thing. So
Yeah.
this is the outcome of it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sundaram.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, I'm not very sure there would be any more questions for Dr. Badri. Let me just check again. No, there are no more questions. So thank you, Dr. Badri, for such a wonderful Sunday morning.
Thank you. Thank you very
And,
much. Pleasure is mine.
Yeah, and thank you all who attended this webinar. Thank you for being present. And I wish that we would probably hear from Dr. Badri again on. He's got several other things to talk about. This is just one of those that we requested him to speak about. So let's hope we'll have Dr. Badri again giving us another talk on yet another interesting topic. So thank you, Dr. Badri, again, and thank you all, and wish you all enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.